What exactly happens to the most famous jewelry box in the world when the monarch who defined it for 7 decades is gone? The royal jewels cannot simply be locked away in a museum to gather dust. They have to go back to work. But stepping into a vault filled with a beloved queen's memories is an incredibly delicate challenge. Wear a familiar tiara, and it might feel too soon for a public that isn't quite ready for change. Leave the historic pieces in the dark, and you are essentially freezing royal history. It is a glittering tightrope walk between honoring an iconic legacy and establishing a brand new era. And watching exactly how Queen Camilla has chosen to navigate this beautiful minefield is absolutely fascinating. We had Queen Elizabeth II with us for 70 long years. She was a constant, steady presence in a rapidly changing world, and naturally, we all grew incredibly attached to her. I still miss her, and I know from our past conversations that so many of you do too. But time does not stand still, and the monarchy must move forward. Change is inevitable, even when our hearts are not entirely ready for it. Now, King Charles III is on the throne, and Camilla has stepped into the role of Queen Consort. It is always worth remembering that this transition happened with Elizabeth's sincere, publicly stated blessing before she passed away. Stepping into this position has placed Camilla in a remarkably complex situation. She has a vital job to do. She must establish her own presence, support the king, and represent the monarchy on the world stage. Yet, at the exact same time, she has to navigate the profound sorrow of a public that is still mourning a much-beloved monarch. It is an incredibly delicate balancing act. The royal jewelry collection is meant to be worn. It is an active, working collection. But finding that invisible line between paying a respectful tribute to the late queen and appearing to encroach upon her iconic image is no easy task. Let us look at how Camilla has navigated this delicate balance in her new role. Before we begin, please support my channel by clicking on the like and subscribe buttons. Thank you. The clearest place to begin is with the crown's great ceremonial jewels, pieces whose public role extends far beyond their association with any one monarch. On May 6, 2023, at the coronation, Camilla wore the magnificent coronation necklace. This breathtaking piece, centered around the brilliant Lahore diamond, was originally crafted for Queen Victoria back in 1858. Since then, it has been worn for the coronations of Queen Alexandra, Queen Mary, Queen Elizabeth the Queen Mother, Queen Elizabeth II, and now Camilla. When a jewel follows such a strict historic lineage, we are looking at the continuation of state business. During that same historic ceremony, Camilla wore Queen Mary's crown, originally made for the 1911 coronation. However, it was carefully adapted for her with a very special addition. The Cullinan 3, 4, and 5 diamonds were set directly into the crown. For decades, Queen Elizabeth II wore these spectacular diamonds as some of her favorite brooches. Buckingham Palace officially announced that setting these stones into the crown was a deliberate tribute to the late queen. It is important to highlight this because here we know for an absolute fact that honoring Elizabeth's memory was explicitly part of the official plan, setting a standard for how we might view her other choices. We see this exact same principle at work with the magnificent George IV state diadem. Created for the coronation of King George IV in 1821, it is an absolute masterpiece set with 1,333 diamonds, featuring the national emblems of the rose, the thistle, and the shamrock. Yes, we are incredibly used to seeing it on Elizabeth II. She wore it beautifully on her way to her own coronation in 1953, and then regularly used it for the state openings of Parliament. Her profile wearing this very diadem is printed on British and Commonwealth postage stamps and coins. Because of that, it is so easy to feel like it belongs exclusively to her. But historically, this piece was worn by Queen Adelaide, Queen Victoria, Queen Alexandra, Queen Mary, and the Queen Mother long before Elizabeth ever put it on. Camilla has now worn it for the state openings of Parliament in November 2023, July 2024, and most recently in May 2026. No matter how closely this diadem is tied to the famous portraits of Queen Elizabeth, When it is worn at the state opening, it belongs first and foremost to the ceremony itself. As we shift our gaze from the brilliance of a single diamond to the grand, sweeping scale of a state ritual, the reality becomes clear. Asking a new queen to give up this diadem out of respect is almost the same as asking the monarchy to stop its most ancient traditions. The collection must continue to work. But what if a jewel did not appear 100 years before Elizabeth, but instead existed entirely thanks to her own personal choice? During her remarkable 70-year reign, Queen Elizabeth II rarely purchased or commissioned large jewels for herself. For the most part, her collection grew through magnificent diplomatic gifts and the breathtaking historic inheritances passed down from her predecessors, most notably Queen Mary and the Queen Mother. But there are a few striking exceptions where she took matters into her own hands. Let us look back at those rare moments when Elizabeth stepped out of her role as a custodian and became a creator, and see exactly how Camilla is choosing to handle this incredibly personal part of the late Queen's legacy today. Take the Belgian sapphire tiara. When Elizabeth married in 1947, her beloved father, King George VI, gave her a magnificent suite of Victorian sapphires. But the set lacked a matching tiara. So, in 1963, Elizabeth did something unusual. She acquired a beautiful 19th-century sapphire necklace that had once belonged to Princess Louise of Belgium. She cleverly had it placed on a tiara frame to complete her father's parure. When Camilla stepped out in this exact tiara for the South African state banquet in 2022, it felt like a deeply respectful nod to Elizabeth's brilliant eye for jewelry. Another striking example of the late Queen's personal commissions is the Burmese ruby tiara. In the early 1970s, Elizabeth needed a red tiara to wear with certain state orders, as the historic ruby circlet was still being used by the Queen Mother. So, in 1973, Elizabeth went to Gerard and commissioned a brand new piece using her own wedding gifts. She incorporated 96 rubies gifted to her by the people of Burma. The Burmese tradition dictates that these rubies protect the wearer from 96 diseases, a rather prophetic gift considering the Queen lived a long, wonderfully healthy life to the age of 96. To complete the heraldic Tudor rose design, she made the somewhat controversial decision to dismantle another wedding gift, the delicate Cartier floral tiara she received from the Nizam of Hyderabad. This ruby tiara is entirely Elizabeth's authorial work. It is her unique vision brought to life in gems. So, when Queen Camilla chose to wear the Burmese ruby tiara at the state banquets for South Korea in November 2023 and Japan in June 2024, it was quite a revelation. Personally, I had fully expected Camilla to eventually reach for the Oriental circlet when she needed a ruby tiara, given her well-known fondness for the Queen Mother's jewelry. Instead, she chose the Burmese. Of course, it took a moment of adjustment to see it on Camilla at first, simply because, up until that point, this tiara had only ever been worn by Elizabeth II. But I see this gesture as much more than just a respectful nod to the past. It is a wonderful acknowledgement of the late Queen's personal contribution to expanding the royal collection. And I must say, on a purely stylistic level, the impressive scale of this tiara suits Camilla's signature hairstyle absolutely perfectly. She truly looks magnificent in it. Speaking of the sets Elizabeth built, there is a fascinating little detail I have been keeping an eye on. In 1957, Elizabeth commissioned the grand Brazilian aquamarine tiara to match a spectacular coronation gift from the people of Brazil. Interestingly, Camilla has not yet used any pieces from this magnificent parure. When she chose an aquamarine headpiece for the diplomatic reception at Buckingham Palace in November 2024, she opted for the much smaller aquamarine ribbon tiara instead, completing her look with aquamarine jewels from her own personal collection. Perhaps the majestic Brazilian suite is simply waiting for the right grand occasion. There is a profound difference between a jewel a queen designs for herself and a jewel that actually becomes her face to the world. That distinction brings us to the most delicate, perhaps the most emotionally charged jewelry moment of this new reign. The date was October 18, 2023. The setting was the Lord Mayor's banquet at Mansion House in London. I have to admit, When I saw the very first photographs from that evening flash across my screen, I completely froze. I absolutely did not expect such an early return of this specific piece. Camilla stepped out into the Grand Hall wearing the Girls of Great Britain and Ireland tiara. Yes, 13 months had passed since we said our final goodbyes to Queen Elizabeth II, but emotionally, for so many people, the calendar simply did not matter. Many royal watchers fully expected this particular tiara to rest quietly in the vault for at least a decade, or assumed it might bypass this generation entirely and eventually be worn by Catherine, Princess of Wales. It is a fascinating psychological reaction. We accept that palaces, titles, and duties pass on immediately, but jewelry feels intensely personal. Originally an 1893 wedding gift to the future Queen Mary from a committee of young women, this tiara was handed down to Elizabeth in 1947 as a wedding present. She lovingly called it Granny's tiara and wore it for over 7 decades. But to the rest of us, it was the literal, graphic emblem of her era. It is the very silhouette stamped on our coins, printed on our banknotes, and featured on endless official portraits. Seeing this absolute symbol of Elizabeth on someone else felt, to some, incredibly jarring. But the visual impact of that October evening did not stop at the tiara. Camilla also paired it with the South African diamond necklace and bracelet. Let us step back in time for just a moment to 1947. A young 21-year-old Princess Elizabeth is on a royal tour in South Africa. The Prime Minister presents her with a magnificent necklace of 21 brilliant diamonds on behalf of the nation. She later shortened the piece, using the extra links to craft a matching bracelet, and affectionately referred to them as her best diamonds. While these diamonds might not be the most instantly recognizable emblem of Elizabeth's reign, in the same way the tiara is, they were an incredibly personal, sentimental 21st birthday gift. Seeing them worn together with Granny's tiara naturally felt a bit sudden to many. But if we look closely at the context of the evening, the historical setting speaks volumes all on its own. It was a grand evening banquet at Mansion House, hosted specifically to celebrate King Charles III in his coronation year. During this visit, the king took part in the ancient pearl sword ceremony, a ritual confirming the monarch's authority over the City of London, which Queen Elizabeth II also performed during her own coronation year in 1953. Because this was a highly formal evening event, royal protocol dictated that Camilla had to wear a tiara. But which one to choose? The entire evening was built around one single concept: unbroken continuity. The new monarch was stepping into a historic relationship between the crown and the city, continuing a line that stretches back centuries. Against that deeply historical backdrop, the Girls of Great Britain and Ireland tiara was not a casual choice. It was an incredibly powerful visual statement. By wearing the ultimate emblem of Elizabeth's reign at the very event where her husband was cementing his new role, Camilla crossed a vital symbolic boundary. Rather than a personal whim, it was a profound way to honor the late Queen's memory, sending a quiet but powerful message: the monarch has changed, the institution of the crown, and the legacy of Elizabeth II lives on. Since that evening, this stunning tiara has gracefully entered Camilla's working wardrobe. She wore it again just weeks later at the diplomatic reception in December 2023, and we saw it sparkling once more at the state banquet for the German president in December 2025. What started as an unexpected return has slowly become a beautiful new chapter in the life of the royal collection. The true beauty of a royal collection lies in its incredibly deep, multi-generational history. When we look at these pieces, we are not just looking at beautiful stones, we are looking at a timeline of the monarchy itself. This became breathtakingly clear in December 2024 during the state banquet for the Emir of Qatar at Buckingham Palace, when Queen Camilla stepped out wearing Queen Alexandra's Kokoshnik tiara. I must admit, Queen Alexandra's Kokoshnik is a mesmerizing sight. It projects real, uncompromising royal power in its purest form. Crafted from dozens of towering diamond bars, it creates a literal wall of light that flashes brilliantly with every slight movement of the head. Naturally, because Queen Elizabeth II wore it so magnificently and so consistently for 7 decades, it is the first image that comes to our minds. But her chapter, as glorious as it was, is just one part of a much older story. This tiara was actually created back in 1888 as a silver wedding anniversary gift for the Princess of Wales, the future Queen Alexandra. Its striking, unusual shape was deliberately modeled after the traditional Russian headdresses worn by her sister, Empress Maria Feodorovna of Russia. After Alexandra, it passed to Queen Mary, and only then to Elizabeth. By wearing it today, Camilla is taking her rightful place as the 4th queen in the biography of this magnificent piece. She is highlighting that they are all links in one long, unbroken, and brilliantly sparkling chain. It is so easy to say that these treasures should be put away for a generation so we can grieve in peace. But we really have to ask ourselves, can we honestly lock away a working tiara simply out of respect for the late queen? If we follow that logic, where does it end? With that same reasoning, we should lock the gates of Buckingham Palace, retire the royal carriages, and hide away her pearls. These magnificent jewels are not just pretty, sentimental accessories. They are the working tools of the monarchy. They are meant to be seen, to project stability, endurance, and soft power to the world. While tiaras are reserved for grand state banquets, it is the humble brooch that serves as the true, everyday companion of a working queen. Much like the late Queen Elizabeth II, Camilla is a tremendous fan of brooches, and I absolutely love observing which pieces she chooses for different occasions. When you look closely at the royal heirlooms she selects, alongside the lovely brooches from her own private collection, you can see a very thoughtful pattern. She uses them for quiet diplomacy, to showcase significant historical legacies, and to gently weave Elizabeth's more personal favorites into her own working wardrobe. When it comes to profound royal history, she looks to pieces like Prince Albert's brooch. Let us travel back in time for just a moment, all the way to the 19th century, to February 9th, 1840 to be exact. It is the day before a royal wedding, and Prince Albert presents his bride, Queen Victoria, with a magnificent oval sapphire surrounded by diamonds. Victoria treasured this romantic gift so deeply that she designated it an heirloom of the crown, ensuring it would stay with future monarchs. Since then, it has been worn by Queen Alexandra, Queen Mary, the Queen Mother, and yes, very frequently by Queen Elizabeth II. Camilla has now seamlessly integrated this sapphire into her own working wardrobe, taking it on state visits to Germany in 2023 and Italy in 2025, and wearing it beautifully at Royal Ascot. When she wears this historic sapphire, or when she chooses Queen Mary's diamond thistle brooch for engagements in Scotland, she is paying tribute to a grand continuation of history. These jewels are the sparkling threads that sew the different eras of the monarchy together. Another breathtaking example of this deep history is Queen Mary's carved emerald brooch. In 1911, during the famed Delhi Durbar, a deputation known as the Ladies of India presented Queen Mary with a spectacular emerald, intricately carved with a rose on one side and floral designs on the other, all bordered by diamonds. Queen Elizabeth II inherited it in 1953, but she actually kept it tucked away until the 2000s. When Camilla debuted this magnificent carved stone on Ladies' Day at Royal Ascot on June 20, 2024, she brought a century-old imperial heirloom back into the bright June sunshine. But then there are the brooches that feel much closer to the late Queen Elizabeth's personal story. Take the Jardine Star brooch, for example. The most widely accepted story has always been that this late Victorian, 8-pointed diamond star was bequeathed to Queen Elizabeth II by a somewhat mysterious Lady Jardine in 1981. But recently, some very dedicated royal jewelry sleuths have unearthed a fascinating alternative theory. By digging into historical diaries, they suggest this star might actually be a deeply sentimental family piece, one of 2 diamond stars given to a young Princess Elizabeth for her 16th birthday by her parents, King George VI, and the Queen Mother. Whatever its true origin might be, it quickly became one of Elizabeth's absolute favorites. We saw it pinned to her coats during Christmas broadcasts, memorial services, and of course, at Royal Ascot. Camilla officially debuted at Royal Ascot on June 21, 2024, and has worn it beautifully on several occasions since. It feels like a quiet, comforting nod to the past. Then there are brooches with a history so unique, they simply take your breath away. In 1947, Princess Elizabeth received a truly extraordinary wedding gift from a Canadian geologist, a massive pink diamond. After a meticulous cutting process, the stone yielded a flawless, breathtaking 23.6-carat pink gem. Cartier crafted it into a delicate floral brooch, and even Queen Mary stepped in to help discuss the design. Elizabeth wore it beautifully for 7 decades. Camilla carefully brought this incredibly personal jewel back into the light on May 15, 2024, and wore it again at Royal Ascot in June 2026. And speaking of spectacular stones, let us briefly return to a diamond of truly epic proportions, the Cullinan 5. We already talked about how this magnificent heart-shaped diamond was temporarily set into Camilla's coronation crown as a deliberate, official tribute. Interestingly, while Camilla has not yet publicly worn the massive Cullinan 3 and 4, affectionately known as Granny's chips, which were also in that crown, the Cullinan 5 has made a full return to royal duty. Camilla officially brought it back into circulation as a brooch at a Buckingham Palace garden party in May 2024. Since then, she has seamlessly added it to her regular daytime rotation, taking it across the Atlantic for the state visit to the US and wearing it beautifully at Royal Ascot. Personally, I view these appearances simply as a natural continuation of history. Sometimes, the truest form of respect you can show to a royal jewel is to simply let it continue its royal work. However, I also completely understand those who still feel a bit protective of these pieces. Because choosing a brooch feels so much freer and less dictated by rigid protocol than wearing a state diadem, it naturally feels like a deeply personal choice. That is exactly why seeing them on someone else can still pinch the heart a little. One of the most fascinating things to observe in Camilla's journey as queen is how she navigates the vast, almost unfathomable depths of the royal vaults. Rather than solely relying on the familiar, Camilla has been reaching into the very back of the jewelry boxes, bringing out breathtaking treasures that have been hidden from our eyes for decades. A beautiful example of this happened in November 2025 at the diplomatic reception. Camilla arrived at Windsor Castle wearing the Greville Emerald Kokoshnik tiara. What is so interesting to note here is that before Camilla, no queen had ever worn this magnificent tiara in public. It was bequeathed to the Queen Mother in 1942, and then passed to Elizabeth in 2002. Aside from Princess Eugenie borrowing it for her wedding in 2018, this towering wave of diamonds and emeralds had remained entirely unseen by the world. Then, just a few weeks later at the German state banquet, she surprised us again with another piece from the Greville bequest, the massive Greville emerald necklace, which she paired beautifully with the Girls of Great Britain and Ireland tiara. Queen Elizabeth II wore this specific emerald necklace, with its stunning cabochon drops, only once, at a reception in 2019. By choosing these rare emeralds for different occasions, Camilla gives them the grand royal life they were created for. We saw this same thoughtful approach during the highly anticipated state visit to the United States in April 2026. Her exploration of the archives began the very moment she stepped off the plane in Maryland. She pinned a special Cartier brooch to her coat, featuring the Union Jack and the Stars and Stripes gathered together in diamonds, rubies, and sapphires. This was originally presented to Queen Elizabeth II in 1957 by the Mayor of New York. Yet, in all her 70 years on the throne, there is no public record of Elizabeth ever wearing it. After nearly 7 decades in the dark, Camilla finally gave this thoughtful diplomatic gift its moment to shine on American soil. The very next evening, for the White House state banquet, Camilla turned to another rare set, the historic necklace and earrings from the Kent Amethyst demi-parure. Now, Queen Elizabeth II actually wore the brooch from this set very frequently for decades, often pinning it to her vibrant purple coats. But she only wore the heavy, antique necklace and earrings a couple of times, most notably during a visit to Portugal in 1985. Camilla brought the necklace and earrings together, adapting the earrings into clips and fully embracing the striking purple stones to build a gala style that feels distinctly her own. This gentle exploration of the unseen has almost become a signature move. During the state visit to Berlin in March 2023, she wore a delicate diamond and turquoise floral brooch. The palace revealed it was a confirmation gift from Queen Mary to Princess Elizabeth in 1942. Again, there are no known public photographs of Elizabeth ever wearing it. And on Commonwealth Day in March 2024, she debuted a massive, heart-shaped aquamarine and diamond brooch. The palace noted it came from Queen Elizabeth's collection, though jewelry historians have traced its origins back to Queen Alexandra around 1904. The exact chain of inheritance hasn't been officially published yet, which adds a lovely layer of mystery, but we know it had vanished from the public eye for over a century. I really love watching this approach. It shows that Camilla isn't trying to completely imitate Elizabeth II or simply appropriate her famous jewels. Instead, she skillfully navigates the royal vaults, bringing out these rare, long-forgotten pieces to create her own unique style, while never forgetting to pay a beautiful, respectful tribute to the late Queen's memory. While discovering unworn treasures is a brilliant way to establish her own style, what happens when Queen Camilla needs to wear the famous historic pieces, but they simply do not fit her? This brings us to a rather controversial, yet entirely necessary aspect of the royal jewelry collection: the courage of adaptation. You see, unlike the late Queen Elizabeth II, who actually had her ears pierced in the summer of 1951, specifically so she could comfortably wear her heavier antique earrings, Camilla does not have pierced ears. She also has a different silhouette, a different neckline preference, and her own distinct sartorial elegance. To make the royal collection work for her today, she is not afraid to physically modify these historic pieces. We already touched on this briefly when we looked at the striking Kent amethyst demi-parure she wore in Washington. To wear those heavy Victorian earrings, they had to be adapted into clips. But the true test of this courage comes when she alters pieces with deep, profoundly personal sentimental value, most notably the King George VI Sapphire Suite. This magnificent diamond and sapphire necklace and earring set was a wedding gift to Princess Elizabeth in 1947 from her beloved father. It is an incredibly intimate piece of family history, yet Camilla has boldly tailored it to her own frame. When she debuted the suite at the South African State Banquet at Buckingham Palace in November 2022, she wore the necklace beautifully shortened. Furthermore, during a state banquet in the spring of 2026, she appeared to wear the original earrings from that very suite, carefully adapted to sit comfortably on her unpierced ears. I know the thought of altering such historic, personal royal jewels might make some purists a little nervous, but the truth is, these alterations are not permanent. Just because an antique earring has been converted into a clip today does not mean it can never be worn as a traditional pierced earring in the future. All of these technical changes are entirely reversible. Personally, I am not against these small adjustments if they better suit the preferences and comfort of the woman wearing them. As long as the jewel can eventually be returned to its original state, preserving its long memory and history, I think it is a wonderful thing. The most important result of this simple change is that Camilla can actually continue to wear these magnificent pieces right now. But I am very curious to hear your thoughts on this. How do you feel about historic royal jewels being altered for a new wearer? Do you think these small, reversible changes are a brilliant practical solution? Or should historical pieces be left completely untouched? Please let me know down in the comments, as I always love reading your perspectives. Stepping into the role of Queen Consort after the monumental 70-year reign of Queen Elizabeth II is no easy task, especially when it comes to opening that famous royal jewelry box. Every single choice is scrutinized, and almost every gem carries a heavy weight of history and public memory. Today, we have tried to trace Camilla's approach to this immense challenge. As we have seen, she is walking a very delicate line, honoring the late Queen's memory by continuing the grand tradition of the historic royal jewels, gently adapting historical pieces to keep them alive, and carving out her own unique space by bringing forgotten treasures back into the light. At the end of the day, I truly believe that the highest tribute you can pay to a magnificent jewel is to let it shine, rather than hiding it away in the dark. But I would absolutely love to hear your perspective. If you were in her position, what tactics would you choose when navigating such a famous, emotionally charged jewelry collection? And what do you think of the choices Camilla has made so far? Please share your thoughts down in the comments. I read every single one of them, and I am always so grateful for the incredibly intelligent and thoughtful discussions we have there. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss our next cup of tea together and the new secrets waiting for us in the royal vaults. See you very soon!